The charges fired, and the bridge collapsed exactly as the orders required. The doctrine said I was to withdraw, but the riverbank was already slipping from our control. I stayed behind the shattered concrete with a machine gun that was not mine. Each burst bought minutes the plan had never accounted for. By nightfall, the bank was lost, and I had given it everything the system did not ask of me. On the 10th of May 1940, along the Albert Canal in eastern Belgium, German forces began their western offensive. Bridges across the canal became immediate objectives. Belgian engineers had prepared demolition charges weeks earlier. Their task was simple in principle: deny the crossings, slow the advance, buy time for the field army to reposition toward the dial line. At Veldwezelt, one of the key bridges spanned the canal with a steel truss structure resting on concrete abutments. Explosives were placed along critical joints and bearings. Telephone cables ran back to firing points dug into the bank. The demolition plan followed established doctrine: wait until the enemy approached, trigger the charges, fall back. Among the men assigned to the site was a Belgian Army engineer named Marcelin Lequeux. He was not an infantryman by training. He specialized in field works and demolitions. His routine in the days before the invasion consisted of inspections. He checked detonators for moisture. He measured cable continuity with a field tester. He verified that sandbags shielding the firing station were properly stacked. He recorded times and guard rotations. The operational situation shifted rapidly after dawn on the 10th of May. German airborne troops descended near the canal crossings. Gliders landed with precision. Assault detachments moved directly toward the bridges. The objective was speed. Seize or disable the demolitions before they could be fired. At Veldwezelt, Belgian defenders observed movement on the eastern bank. Small arms fire began within minutes. Telephone lines were cut in several sectors. The engineer detachment attempted to maintain contact with adjacent positions, but communication faltered. Reports came in fragments. Enemy troops were close. Charges might need to be fired early. The demolition order was given as German elements pressed forward. Lequeux and his team moved to the firing point. He checked the circuit once more. The signal was sent. The bridge erupted in a controlled blast. Steel twisted. Concrete fractured. Sections dropped into the canal. The span became impassable. Doctrine dictated the next step: withdraw westward. Rejoin the infantry line. Prepare secondary obstacles. But the situation on the ground no longer aligned with doctrine. German airborne troops had already crossed in small numbers using boats and improvised means. Others fired from the eastern bank, covering attempts to approach the wreckage. The Belgian infantry assigned to support the engineers suffered heavy losses in the first exchanges. Several positions fell silent. Smoke obscured visibility along the canal. Lequeux found himself near the demolished abutment with limited ammunition and a light machine gun left by a fallen soldier. The withdrawal route was exposed. Crossfire swept the embankment road. He assessed the terrain as he had been trained to do for construction projects. Angles of approach, fields of fire, cover offered by debris. The canal's western bank sloped sharply upward from the waterline. Broken girders protruded at irregular angles. Chunks of masonry created shallow pockets of concealment. From this debris, a defender could observe both the canal surface and the far bank. Movement across the water would be visible against the reflection of the sky. He remained. There was no formal order recorded instructing him to hold the position alone. The choice emerged from circumstance. If German troops established a firm foothold at the demolished bridge, they could assemble pontoon sections under relative cover. Even a partial crossing could compromise the sector. He positioned the machine gun behind a slab of displaced concrete. He aligned the barrel toward likely crossing points. He kept bursts short to conserve ammunition. The recoil shifted loose dust from the rubble with each firing. German units attempted to move along the canal edge, probing for shallow crossings. Several times they tried to assemble small craft. Each movement drew fire from the engineer's position. Observers on the far bank hesitated, uncertain how many defenders remained. Throughout the morning, artillery fell sporadically near the canal. Shells impacted fields behind the embankment. Fragments struck the broken steel of the bridge, producing sharp metallic echoes. The engineer adjusted his position repeatedly, aware that muzzle flashes could reveal him. By midday, Belgian command in the sector had become fragmented. Radio sets were scarce. Runners failed to return. Local decisions determined survival. Lequeux's training had centered on calculations and timing. He understood structural load, blast radius, and the sequence of detonations. Now his work narrowed to sight alignment and trigger discipline. He monitored the canal surface for ripples indicating movement. He fired only when shapes resolved into targets. At least twice, German troops attempted to approach under smoke cover. The wind shifted unpredictably along the waterway. Gaps in the smoke exposed silhouettes. Short bursts disrupted the effort. Voices carried faintly across the canal, issuing commands in German. As the afternoon progressed, ammunition diminished. He collected magazines from fallen Belgian soldiers when possible. He crawled under fragments of steel to reach them. Each movement risked exposure. The rubble cut through his uniform and gloves. A mortar round struck near the demolished span, showering him with debris. The blast concussed him briefly. He continued firing once his hearing steadied. The canal water, stirred by impacts, lapped against twisted beams below. German engineers on the far side attempted to bring forward bridging materials. They required suppressive fire to work safely. The persistent defense from the western bank complicated their timing. Reports later indicated confusion within the assault detachments regarding the strength of resistance. Late in the day, additional German forces reached positions upstream. They searched for alternative crossings beyond the destroyed bridge. This shift reduced direct pressure at Veldwezelt. The lone defender's fire had contributed to delay, though he could not measure its scale. As darkness approached, sporadic shots continued across the canal. The engineer's ammunition was nearly exhausted. He had been in position for hours without reinforcement. The Belgian line elsewhere had begun to yield under concentrated attack. Eventually, German troops advanced along the western bank from a flanking direction. The position at the bridge became untenable. Accounts indicate that Leclerc was wounded during this phase and captured after resisting until he could no longer continue. The canal crossing, though denied at that specific span, was ultimately bypassed elsewhere. The operational doctrine governing demolition detachments emphasized timely withdrawal. Engineers were not intended to function as isolated strongpoints. Yet the rapidity of airborne assault on the 10th of May disrupted established sequences. The bridge had been destroyed as planned. The subsequent defense emerged from immediate necessity rather than written instruction. In the following days, Belgian forces retreated deeper into the country. The campaign concluded within weeks. Individual actions along the canal became minor notes within a larger collapse. Post-war documentation of the defense at Veldwezelt remained limited. German after-action reports referenced unexpected resistance near certain demolished crossings. Belgian military records, reconstructed after occupation, included commendations for engineers who completed demolitions under fire. Marcelin Leclerc's conduct was eventually recognized. He received national honors for bravery. The citation emphasized the destruction of the bridge and the prolonged defense of the riverbank. It did not dramatize the event. It described persistence under hostile conditions. The Albert Canal in peacetime returned to commercial function. New bridges replaced those destroyed in 1940. Traffic resumed above water that once carried debris and gunfire. The role of combat engineers in the early hours of the invasion illustrates the vulnerability of fixed defenses to airborne assault. Bridges were prepared meticulously, yet preparation could not account for every contingency. When communication failed and infantry support collapsed, individuals faced decisions beyond formal scope. The isolated defense of a demolished bridge did not alter the strategic outcome of the campaign. It did, however, delay local consolidation and complicated enemy planning in the immediate term. Time measured in hours rather than days can influence adjacent sectors. Within military archives, such actions are often summarized in brief lines. Demolition successful. Position held temporarily. Personnel captured or wounded. The lived experience behind those lines involves dust, noise, and calculation under strain. The engineer at Veldwezelt began his day checking wires and detonators. By evening, he had converted structural debris into a defensive position. His tools shifted from pliers to a machine gun. The riverbank became both workplace and battlefield. After the war, Belgium rebuilt infrastructure and reassessed its defensive planning. Airborne threats received renewed attention. Bridging procedures were revised. Demolition detachments incorporated lessons about rapid assault. The name of the engineer remains associated with the bridge site in local memory. A plaque marks the location. It records the date and the action in restrained language. The canal flows steadily beneath modern spans. Few passing vehicles paused to consider the hours in May 1940, when twisted steel blocked the waterway, and a single defender delayed an advance from behind shattered concrete. Stories of large formations often dominate histories of the Second World War. Less visible are moments when technical specialists, trained for support roles, assume direct combat functions under isolated conditions. The defense at Veldwezelt stands as one such instance. An engineer completed his assigned demolition. He remained at the riverbank beyond prescribed limits. He acted within the immediate demands of terrain and timing. Recognition followed quietly. There were no sweeping claims attached to the event. Only acknowledgement that after the bridge was blown apart, an engineer defended the riverbank alone for as long as circumstances allowed. For more documented accounts of overlooked actions in the Second World War, consider subscribing to the channel.